Hi, welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about the 5 things that you absolutely, definitely must do if you want to succeed in learning to code. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're doing it through a bootcamp or a university degree or teaching yourself at home. No matter how you decide to learn to code, these 5 principles, these 5 tips are essential for you to succeed. These tips are designed to help you feel more comfortable, confident, and effective in your journey to teach yourself to code. Hello there, welcome to my channel. Listen, after more than 12 years as a lawyer, I tried to start my own company. It was a startup and I was a non-technical founder. Sure, we managed to get a product to market, but you know what? I had a horrible time finding technical co-founders. In fact, I found a couple, but they ended up leaving. I was so sick of it. At the age of 37, I finally taught myself to code. Man, it wasn't easy. A year or so later, I ended up joining a startup as an engineer. And a year after that, I joined Google as an engineer. So listen, if you want to transition your career into tech, or you want to become your own technical co-founder, subscribe to my channel. Now, if you haven't already, I suggest you check out part 1 of this video, which talks about the 5 things you do not want to do if you want to be successful at teaching yourself to code. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Zubin, and I help people transition careers to code. So everything that I talk about on this channel, everything I talk about with my coaching students is designed to help them achieve the outcomes that I myself have achieved in my life. This channel, therefore, just documents my playbook. Okay, enough introduction. Let's talk about the 5 things that you absolutely must do to be successful when you're teaching yourself to code. Now, keep in mind that these are things that you've got to practice and apply to your life consistently every single day. And it's not a weekend hack or a quick fix or something you just do once and forget about later on after you've got the result. These things that I'm going to share with you are things that you've got to adopt as part of your lifestyle. And that's the only way you can consistently get results. Whether it's in learning to code or any other transition that you're looking to achieve in your life, these principles have to become part of who you are. So, principle number 1 do is you got to adopt a growth mindset. Now, the basic idea behind a growth mindset is that your abilities, your skills and talents are not fixed. In fact, you know this already from your life. There was a time when you couldn't walk, and then you could walk. There was a time when you couldn't drive, and then you could drive. There was a time when you had difficulty spelling a simple word like cat or bat, and you learned how to do these things. So a growth mindset is what it takes to go from not knowing something to knowing something. Now, it turns out that most of us probably started off life with a fundamental growth mindset. It seems to be a natural trait or attribute that children just have. They assume they can learn anything. But the older we get, life tends to beat that out of us. We have experiences that are negative, that damage our confidence, or we have other people constantly tell us what we can and cannot do. And so the growth mindset starts to leak out of us. By the time we start working, most of us are a mix of both the growth mindset and its opposite, the fixed mindset. Now, if you really want to understand these concepts, I strongly recommend you check out Carol Dweck's TED Talk and try out some of the concepts that she talks about, or really understand what she's getting at and how, decades of research have resulted in the distinction she makes between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, and how a growth mindset in children and adults results in dramatically different outcomes. So how does it help us? Well, a good growth mindset, a practiced growth mindset, is something that causes you to ask radically different questions when you encounter a problem or a setback or a failure. For example, when I was trying to learn JavaScript and I was getting really stuck on promises and async away, I tried to adopt a growth mindset. After a week of struggling and not getting anywhere, by the way, I was starting to feel really pretty badly about myself. I was starting to feel dumb, stupid, incompetent, all the usual stuff. So after about a week of struggling with that, I challenged myself to adopt a growth mindset and ask a different question, or ask a question that would help me make progress. And so I asked myself, okay, who do I know who'd probably know how to do this? Who can I reach out to who can explain this concept to me? What do I need to do, or what needs to happen for me to feel a little more confident about this concept? These are much better questions, by the way, than what I'd been asking myself the first week is, why am I so stupid? Or why can't I get this? Or how will I ever understand this? Like, those are negative questions that made me feel poorly about myself, and they also showed a fixed mindset. Whereas a growth mindset is one that says, what do I need to do to get closer to the outcome I want, even though right now it doesn't feel like I can get there. Ultimately, a growth mindset is a framework for thinking about problems and setbacks that helps you make progress. The number 2 thing you need to do. By the way, this is not in any order, right? It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so this is principle number 2, which is make friends with the imposter syndrome. Now, let me assure you that all of us feel the imposter syndrome at various points of time in our life. The funny thing about the imposter syndrome is it really makes us feel that we're all alone. It makes us feel that we're the only ones stupid enough to not get something, or we're frauds, we don't deserve to be here, we don't belong here, we're not good enough. These are classic signs of the imposter syndrome, and let me promise you now, even though it feels like you may be the only one feeling it and everybody around you is being all confident and super cool and able to do things and effective and competent, let me promise you, they feel it from time to time, and you are not alone. This is something that is pretty much universal to the human experience. Look, you don't even have to just take my word for it. In the description below, I'm going to put 2 links. One's to a conversation by Mike Cannon-Brookes, again, a TED Talk, where he talks about his imposter syndrome. And if you don't know who he is, he's the founder of Atlassian. And the second one that I'm going to put in the description is a link to a talk given by Larry Page, where he talks about his experience of imposter syndrome, especially when he got into Stanford, right? So this is important because you are not alone. Really, really successful people feel it. Really, really unsuccessful people also feel it. It's universal. The difference, though, is how we deal with it. Now, one of the things I spend a great deal of time with my coaching students on is how you reframe the imposter syndrome to take it as a positive signal. So if you can look at imposter syndrome as evidence of positive things like growth and progress, then you're going to be able to neutralize it. There is a whole process that you can follow to do that, but the heart of it is, don't assume the imposter syndrome is real or that it means you're not good enough. That's just not true. Rule number 3, or principle number 3, you have to practice reframing failure. Look, it's a hard reality of life that most efforts will result in failure. The ratio of success to failure is quite small. So it's mainly stacked in favor of failure. But failure is really, really important because it is the best learning tool we have. In fact, there's a saying that goes that if you're not failing enough, it's because you're not trying hard enough. Now, I really truly believe that's true, but I didn't always feel that way. And the reason I adopted that belief is because it gives failure a completely new meaning. The normal, natural, healthy response to failure is to feel bad, is to feel disappointed, discouraged, and perhaps in extreme cases, completely demotivated. But if you reframe failure and look at it from a different point of view as being evidence of progress, or it's giving you learning and information that you couldn't have had without the failure, but that information is critical to be effective and successful, then you've just had an advantage come out of that failure. So in other words, if you can look at failure as being a learning opportunity, a teachable moment, as giving you some data that can make your next effort more likely to succeed, then all of these things will make failure less threatening. Certainly it'll make it less discouraging, and it will make you more successful because you will be encouraged to do more things. And the more things you do and the more things you try, the higher your failure rate is going to be, or the higher the number of failures you're going to have, but maybe your failure rate starts to drop. In other words, your success rate starts to lift. So it's really important to reframe failure in your head and in your mind as something that gives you information so that the next time you try something, the odds of success are dramatically improved. The other thing to really keep in mind is that without failure, the lessons don't really stick. It is true that we learn more from our failures, more enduring lessons from our failures than we do from our successes. So failure is really an opportunity to get a whole lot of data on how you can be better. And that's a golden opportunity. Principle 4 is one of my favorite ones. And the principle is a little bit tricky to grasp, so bear with me, okay? The idea is that you want to reduce the number of choices you have to make so that you're more accountable for the few choices that you do make. Now, the reason why this is tricky is like this, right? The more choices you have, the more energy you spend trying to negotiate with yourself, trying to find time for all of these choices, trying to rank the choices and prioritize them. Whereas the better way to do it is to strip away and eliminate as many choices as you can so that you're forced to focus on the few that are going to get you to your result most efficiently. Now, this is actually really, really hard to do, and it comes with a little more experience, or it comes with the help of a mentor or a coach who's got the experience themselves to help you eliminate choices. Look, when you think about it, a lot of what boot camps and universities and colleges, no matter what you're pursuing as a degree, a lot of what they do is they take away choices. They give you a standardized syllabus. In fact, it's so standardized that it's probably not going to be good enough for what you need to achieve in your career. But in general, most people make progress. And that's because they give you a list of things that you have to focus on. They've taken away a whole bunch of choices. But when you're learning to code, you have dozens, if not hundreds of choices that you've got to make. And there's always a voice in your ear, there's always that blog, there's always the opinion of X person that's going to say, well, no, you need to do this and you need to do that, and that's a waste of time. For example, I know a bunch of machine learning students who came to me for advice because they really wanted to know why they weren't making progress, and they had spent the last 4 months learning C++ because Python's implemented in that, and they believe that that's what they need to know to be good data scientists. And really, they'd lost all that time in actually getting good at data science using Python. The point is, you have to focus on the choices that get you closer to your result. And therefore, you need to reduce the number of choices you have to make, boil it down to only the ones that are really, really going to matter for your goal. And then once you achieve your goal, you can learn all the other stuff. I personally went through this problem so many times because I tried to teach myself to code for 4 years, right? And it was only in the 4th attempt that I managed to succeed. First 3 years, I kept failing and I kept quitting. And the reason I failed is every time I started a technology, there were 5 others that suddenly appeared out of the woodwork that I was like, do I need to learn them? And then people would tell me, yeah, of course, it's really important. And so I'd spend 3 weeks dabbling in them, getting completely discouraged, not making progress in the original thing that I had started. And I became a dabbler. And the thing with being a dabbler is you do a lot, but you get nothing done, right? And you know what I'm talking about here. This is a serious problem where most people are so overwhelmed by the number of choices they have. The best way to make progress is to pick your goal, pick the choices that are relevant to that goal, and eliminate everything else. That also keeps you more accountable because the fewer choices you have to keep account of, the more accountable you're going to be. Look, I get the temptation of the new shiny technology, I really do. But all you're doing is you're adding more discussions, debates, negotiations, and internal battles in your head. You're not actually helping yourself get closer to your goal by trying to learn all of these things at the same time. There are steps that need to be taken. Sometimes there is a sequence of, there's an order of operations or a sequence of things you need to do that will help you. And that's really what eliminating choices is about. And sometimes you do need help to figure out how to do that. But that's okay. Get that help from people who've done and achieved what you'd like to achieve. Try and get the highest quality advice you can by going to the people who've actually done what you want to do. And the last point I'd like to make about this thing about eliminating choices is that the less choices you have, the more focus you have. Think about it. It makes perfect sense, right? You're not scattering your focus and attention and energy on a half a dozen things. You're just doing it on 2 things. So there's more energy and focus available for those 2 things. Point number 5 is focus on insight and not just implementation. So what do I mean by this? Most of us have a tendency to want to learn how to do something. And once we do it, we just try to repeat it and get the practice at that thing and try and get better at it without necessarily trying to understand why that particular approach is the best approach in the circumstance. Let me give you a more concrete example, right? This is especially for those of you who are leet code junkies. You love your algorithms and data structures, and you think that's the most important thing to know, and you want to do 100 of them a week. Sometimes, and I fell into this trap too, we tend to focus more on figuring out how to do that problem, how to solve that specific problem. And we practice it and we do dozens of those kinds of problems and we get really good at implementation. But we haven't actually built the mental model. That's what I mean by focusing on insight, is to focus on understanding the class of problems, the mental model that goes into solving those problems. And that way you can generalize it into a broader set of problems. Keep in mind that real life is not like leet code. You're not going to have a clearly worded problem statement. You're not going to have neat constraints provided to you. You're not going to be given a bunch of test cases that help you understand the problem immediately. And you're definitely not going to have the discuss tab or the solutions tab always available. So it's really important for you to focus on understanding the insight and the mental model and not just the implementation details. The more you do this, the better you get at recognizing patterns. And over the course of your career, a lot of your success will come down to pattern recognition, to knowing how to draw from a previous experience and apply that to the current scenario or problem, because that's really what pattern recognition is experiencing something and knowing where else you can generalize that solution to. In life, in coding problems, whatever it is, it's the same principle. So definitely get good at implementation, but also really start to put some focus on understanding and insight. Okay, so that's 5 points for you to think about and to digest. Now, I can't promise that you will always be successful when you pursue your goal, but I can promise and I can guarantee that you will make progress faster, more efficiently, and more successfully if you follow these principles. Look, this framework that I've come up with took me years and years. Before I even started to learn to code, a lot of this framework was starting to come into place. So what's taken me the better part of a decade to learn and understand and figure out, I've just given to you in about 20 minutes. But that's the whole point of learning. Anytime something's figured out from first principles, it takes a ton of time. But then once it's understood, you can learn it in one morning in a classroom. So as long as you practice and adopt these principles in your life, you really internalize these frameworks and don't expect to be an overnight success in it. It's a lifelong campaign, as I mentioned to you. Now, as long as you follow that principle, all the other principles will fall into place and you will start to see results in your life. Most importantly, you will make progress that little bit faster. Now, you may not think that 2 months or 3 months is a material amount of time, but since time is the only finite resource we have, think about it this way. If it takes you 3 months extra to find that perfect developer job or your first developer job, and the reason it took you extra time is because you got distracted or you didn't follow one of these principles, that's extra 3 months of work experience. That's extra 3 months of getting a salary, which is effectively getting paid to learn more programming. So don't treat time lightly. It's your most valuable resource. Spend it even more carefully than you would spend your money. That's why it's important to optimize your life for getting the most results you can. Now, if you've watched this video this far, that's fantastic. That means you're really committed. I wish you all the best, and I'm sure you're going to succeed. Now, if you haven't subscribed and liked already, what's taking you so long? Seriously, do it now. Like and subscribe. It's really important. Your first 10 jobs are going to depend on how quickly you smash the subscribe button. Also, do drop in some comments. That's the best way to engage and interact with me or ask me questions. So don't forget, drop in those comments so you and I can engage with each other and I can deliver even more value to you.